want to first of all say thank you to the Chamber for inviting me to speak at your event today. My name is Michael Henry. I'm a managing partner of a law firm in Toronto, Canada. We're a business law firm, and we help Dutch companies coming to Canada looking to grow their businesses. So I'm delighted to be with you today, and also to talk about the mid-market report that we did recently. Our focus as a business law firm is on what we call the mid-market, which are mid-sized companies, not the huge Unilevers of the world, but companies that have a certain size and complexity that have grown and they're looking to grow further. And we also act for some smaller companies that are on their way to growing into that size. That's really our focus, private companies in the Canadian landscape. And in the past, we have surveyed this group and asked what are their greatest challenges, what are their aspirations, and we've done this and we've had panel discussions. And most recently, of course, COVID is the dominating topic of the day, and we have surveyed CEOs and owners of these mid-market companies and asked them their reactions, their experiences. And so that's what I'd like to share with you today. There is a report that I can share. We can share with Julie, and anybody who wants to receive it, be happy to share that with you. And we do have some mid-market discussions on our YouTube channel on the web. So I think all of us, when this first COVID experience struck, were in a bit of disbelief and shock. And it's the same with Canadian businesses, and likely the same with people's experience in Holland. Really an uncertainty as to how long this would last for, how deep a change it would create, how much disruption would occur. And in our survey, these Canadian company owners and executives admitted candidly that many of them didn't have a plan for something on this scale. And I don't think that should surprise any of us, because as if we were talking 2 years ago and then there were a survey of planning who was ready for a pandemic, I think the answers would be probably very few among us. So the plans that were in place were quickly disrupted, changed, re-engineered in a way for businesses to continue to try and make it through the initial stage. So there was that initial shock and disbelief. And then the next section, the next experience was how to adapt and how to survive. So in our survey, we noticed there are a lot of differences between businesses. There were some in the pharmaceutical field, some in the sanitation field that have done quite well. And as much as there's been a lot of suffering in COVID, it has been a boom for those kinds of businesses. Other businesses, hospitality businesses, restaurant businesses, because of the restrictions now that are in fact being reimposed in Toronto and elsewhere, those businesses have suffered greatly. And then there are some in between, logistics companies, trucking companies, manufacturing businesses that never stopped working and operating and have had sort of a middling experience of the whole thing. So there's that real range of experiences. And as I said, business continuity has been strained. Any plans that existed have been reviewed, revisited, re-engineered, because frankly, nobody was exactly ready for something on this scale and with this depth. Government relief has made a big difference in Canada. As you may already know, there have been a lot of programs from the federal government in particular to relieve rent. So for example, clients of ours that are running restaurants, for example, that have now had to close, some of which have invested significant amounts of money in improvements, what we call leasehold improvements, which is basically the decoration, the outfitting of a restaurant or a retail store. Those kinds of businesses have suffered considerably. And with the drop in revenue, they can apply for wage subsidies. There's also a relief program for commercial leases. We've done a lot of work with clients who are looking to try and renegotiate to get some relief from landlords. Initially, landlords had to cooperate. Now the program has been changed, so tenants can apply. And it's certainly made a big difference. There have also been some small business loans that have been made available through the federal government. So for sure, government subsidies have made a difference. What else happened in this initial stage? Different ways of working, obviously. I mean, we're talking by video conference. I think we all rediscovered video conferencing, or discovered it for the first time, and are managing to work in dispersed groups. I know with our team, we have a regular 9 a.m. Video call where everybody just talks about what they're working on and who needs help and who's got time to help others. And so there's been new ways to connect, and I'm sure you're finding that through your own personal lives and experiences. It's a lot more challenging. Signing documents, commissioning documents has gotten more complicated. Some of our professional rules have been adapted to do that, to meet that. So certainly new ways to work. And then the general experience too has been that employees have risen to the challenge. So in a lot of the businesses we surveyed, we found that the CEOs and the executives were very, and sometimes surprised in a very positive way about how employees had responded to the new challenges of logistics and just getting things done. I mean, it certainly seems to take a lot more time to get anything done. Personally, I find I'm much too close to the kitchen fridge. So that's there are challenges like that. Nothing huge, but certainly working from home can be more of a challenge than sometimes working in the office. So that's been the initial stage. That was the comments that came back to us in our survey. And I think it's interesting to notice that in Canadian businesses, I'm sure this is likely the same in Holland, there's been that survival stage, that the shock, the reaction, and then trying to survive, trying to manage, trying to navigate. Some businesses doing very well, some very deeply challenged. And then the next stage, I think, is the longer strategy. What will it take for businesses to navigate, not just through the end of COVID, but also beyond? And what will have changed completely and changed in a way that's not reversible? None of us have a crystal ball, but it's interesting to hear those discussions among business executives. Certainly in Canada, I imagine there's a similar conversation going on in Holland too among business people. So what will change? And we don't, as I say, we don't have a crystal ball, but here are some interesting themes that came out of our survey. Certainly rethinking fundamentals. There have been a lot of our clients that have looked at a different way to do business. Leasing is a prime example. Expensive office space, expensive retail space. Is that the best way to deliver services or products to a customer? It's in downtown Toronto, where the business center, it's almost like a bit of a ghost town. There's probably 10% of employee or workers actually present in these big towers. And so I think there's bound to be a rethinking of what does office space mean? Do we all need to be congregated? There's certainly benefits that will endure, but I think there's also a lot of rethinking on how do we work together. That I think is definitely going to change. And that was the result. That was the response from our survey. Reconnecting with customers, new ways to connect with customers. So in Toronto right now, there are limits on how many can gather. There are limits on certainly indoor gatherings. So restaurants, stores are very restricted. And in other businesses too, congregating in any large number is not allowed. We're hopeful that those restrictions will be relaxed appropriately and in due course, but right now that's the reality. So there's got to be a new way to connect with customers, and that's what our CEOs responded to in our survey. Rethinking ways of delivering services and connecting with customers. Another change that I think will be enduring, and our survey confirmed this, is health and safety. So how do people interact in the workplace? There's obviously a very heightened concern for disinfecting everything. You know, in our office, in our building, there are all sorts of restrictions about hand washing, hand sanitizing, wearing masks, and that sort of thing. So that I think will be an enduring change as well. And that was certainly the sense from our survey. There are also questions in some businesses of rotating shifts, staggering workspaces so that people are sufficiently distanced to protect them from any kind of spread. Keeping employees engaged, I think that's going to be an enduring challenge too. As people work in dispersed areas, our respondents, the CEOs, said that is going to be an ongoing challenge. As people are working apart, it's sometimes more challenging to make sure it's a cohesive team, that everybody's working together with a common purpose and a common approach, common values. So there'll be new ways of engaging employees that will have to reflect the fact that not everybody's going to be gathered in the boardroom, for example, for a meeting as might have been done in the past. The other thing that CEOs we interviewed mentioned is that keeping track of changes, staying informed. there's almost a deluge of information that we're all getting, and navigating that, finding what is critical, what is interesting but not really critical, is a challenge. Getting the best information, getting it in a timely way, and also applying some common sense and some reflection, of course, too, because frankly, there's no certain path from here to the end of the pandemic, and even the best scientific advice is thoughtful, but still a prediction of what may or may not happen. So there has to be, I think, a weighing of different insights and different sources. That's continuing to be a challenge to the CEOs that we interviewed. And then also, there's also a great thirst connected with that for knowledge and information, and for advice on how to navigate these things. And frankly, as lawyers, there isn't a textbook on how to deal with a pandemic. We've seen all sorts of things, from force majeure clauses, which are sometimes forgotten and buried in the fine print of a contract, to employee issues about employees who work safety issues, employees who may not want to come back to work, actually, even though when conditions improve. There have been also issues about layoffs, all those initial questions, and continuing questions about how to get through the crisis. We noticed too that there's a fair bit of confidence, and that was a positive response to the survey. That of the CEOs we interviewed have felt confident that despite the great challenges, despite the fact that many of them were not completely prepared for this, and frankly, I don't think any of us were, that they feel confident that they can navigate through this and meet the new challenges of a post-COVID world.